choir for that beautiful music. Today's scripture lesson comes to us from the Gospel of Matthew. It is at the end of a long section of parables. It is about the judgment of the nations. Let us listen now for God's holy word. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate people, one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep at his right hand, and the goats at the left. And then the king will say to those at his right hand, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me." And then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and took care of you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me." Then he will say to those at his left hand, "You that are accursed, depart from me into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me. Naked, and you did not give me clothing. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me." And then they will also answer, "Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry, or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not take care of you?" Then he will answer them, "Truly I tell you, just as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. And these will go into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. We are at the end of the church year. It is what, the 23rd, I think, week of Pentecost. This Thursday is Thanksgiving, believe it or not, and next Sunday will be the first Sunday in the season of Advent leading up to Christmas time. And who comes at Christmas time and visits all the department stores and shopping malls across the country? Any guesses? Santa Claus! Father Christmas, jolly old St. Nicholas. You didn't think you were going to hear about Santa Claus today, did you? Now, I'm not searching for any deep theological reflection on your part, but I would like a little help, a little audience participation. What is it that we know about Santa Claus? What does the man do? He gives presents. Anything else?
He eats cookies and drinks milk.
He eats cookies and drinks milk. Santa Claus and I have something in common.
Comes down the chimney.
Comes down the chimney. He brings joy. And he laughs. Anything else that he does?
He flies a sleigh with 8
Flies a sleigh with reindeer. Not nice. The man.
He checks his list.
The man makes lists. He makes lists of the naughty little boys and girls, and he makes lists of the good boys and girls. Now, when we are young, we spend a lot of time worrying about which one of those lists that we are going to be on and why. Because Santa Claus brings gifts. There's something at the end. There is a reward if we behave, if we do right, if we are nice. And what kind of things do nice little boys and girls get on Christmas morning? They get what they want. I didn't always get what I wanted, but I got nice things. And what do naughty boys and girls get on Christmas morning?
What they want.
Sometimes they get what they want too, but they're supposed to get a lump of coal. Now, in the Netherlands, St. Nicholas actually kidnaps little boys and girls, puts them in a sack, and drags them off to Spain, where he's supposedly from. So, American boys and girls ain't got nothing. They get a lump of coal. Dutch boys and girls get kidnapped in a sack and dragged off by a mean old St. Nicholas to Spain. Now, that doesn't sound so bad to me, but if you're a kid being dragged off to another country in a sack by a mean old man, not so good. So, as children, we devote a lot of time to getting on the right list, the nice list. We saw the world when we were children in terms of black and white. And we wanted a very practical, even an easy way to get on that list. We wanted to know what we needed to do, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, to be nice, to get the right kind of reward on Christmas morning. Christmas morning, therefore, became our annual Judgment Day, didn't it? And as that Judgment Day of Christmas approached, we would write letters to the North Pole. We'd send them off to Santa Claus. But before we told him exactly which toy we wanted or which Nintendo game we wanted, or told him about that wonderful pony or kitten that we wanted, we went on a lengthy discourse, many of us did, justifying why it was we were nice, why we deserved to be on that list, didn't we? Now, there are entire websites out there on the internet for parents to look up. You can make lists of things for your kids to do so they have that nice, easy list. There are even templates that kids can fill in for a letter to Santa Claus. I came across one that said, it was already printed up, "Dear Santa, I have been good this year because," and then there were about 5 or 6 lines on which the kid could write why they had been good. And then, "My Christmas wish list is," and about another 5 or 6 lines where the child could say what they wanted for Christmas. I've been good, I get something good out of it. Now, I wrote plenty of those letters when I was a kid, and I imagine you did too. I would tell Santa Claus what a wonderful older brother I had been to my little sister. What I failed to mention in those letters were the times that I popped the heads off of her Barbie dolls, or the times that my older brother and I would conspire to make her believe that the Jabberwocky, do you remember that monster from Alice in Wonderland? We had this recorder and we would make these horrible noises outside her bedroom and we'd say, "Jabberwocky." She cried and she was scared. I had to tell Santa about that. That was not nice list behavior, and I knew it, and I didn't want Santa Claus to know, because I might get a lump of coal. I would also tell Santa Claus about what a good boy I had been at school, and what a good son I had been for my parents. And at times, I certainly was. I got good grades, sometimes I did my chores. But what I failed to report were all the times that I pouted, all the times that I cried, all the times that I shouted when I didn't get my way. I didn't mention the times that I didn't clean my room when I had been asked, or when I didn't walk the dog. That, again, was not nice list behavior. I was a complex child, but I was unable to see it, because I was just that, a child. Unable to understand the complexities of the world, and certainly not able to understand the complexities of myself. We were either naughty or nice. You couldn't be both. Now, when I hear this parable of the sheep and the goats, my mind retreats back to a place where I am just a 7 or 8-year-old boy, where the world is black and white, where there are either sheep or goats. But this time, the stakes are a little higher than a naughty list and a lump of coal. This is the list of the accursed, isn't it? Those sent to eternal punishment in the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. But of course, that's not me, and it's probably not you, is it? We're not goats. That is the stuff that awaits the goats, and we're not goats. We, of course, like when we were little kids, we were on the nice list, we're sheep. We are the ones, aren't we, who are blessed, invited into the kingdom which has been prepared for us from the foundation of the earth. We are the ones invited into eternal life, right? We're the sheep, right? We hope. And so just as I did when I was worried about being on Santa's naughty list when I was a child, I make a list of all my gold star behaviors just to justify my self-branding as a sheep. I hear, I was hungry and you gave me food. So in my mind, I make a list of all the times that I have encountered somebody who was hungry and I gave them food, and I make a mental check mark. Good, I'm on the sheep list. I hear, I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. And again, I go through all those times that I've given a thirsty person something to drink, whether they be needy or not, and I make a mental checklist, check mark. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you gave me clothing. I was sick and you cared for me. I was in prison and you visited me. These seem to be that ABC 1, 2, 3 check mark that we long for as children. And so again, in my mind, I'm checking off all the times that I've donated used clothes to Goodwill, or that I've just given them away. I'm writing in my mind a letter to God, similar to one that I would have written to Santa Claus as a children. This, God, these things that I have done, these are the reason, these are the proof that I am a sheep and I am not a goat. I belong on the right side, not at the left. In 2007, Christian author and essayist Anne Lamott, if you haven't read any of her stuff, she's a wonderful author, spoke at the 12th Annual Writers' Symposium, an event held out on the West Coast. In her interview, she lamented that too many Christians and too many Christian writers act or write as if living the Christian life is going so much better than anybody could have ever hoped for. That they don't hate, that they forgive easily, that they don't have awful moods. She says it doesn't help to focus on people trying to sound really good, as if they have their Christian act together. Because when they do that, that is all that they have. They have an act. Those letters to Santa Claus that we write as children and those that we compose in our minds to God as we hear the parable of the goats and the sheep, they're just that. They're acts. They aren't the whole story. They leave out the tales of popping the heads off of our little sisters' Barbie dolls. They ignore the days when we say, I don't care what we ought to do, or what I better not do. I'm in a bad mood, so I'm going to pout, I'm going to cry, and I'm going to shout. It's my party. I'll cry if I want to. I'm going to sit on the couch today, all day, and watch TV. And I don't care if you're in a bad mood. I'm not going to answer the phone. I don't care if you need to talk. Who here hasn't had one of those days, one of those goat days? I'll raise my hand. I've had plenty. I've had more than my fair share. I even had one last night. Last night. Sometimes I have goat hours. So who here can squarely be branded a goat and who can be branded a sheep? Any of us? Now, Matthew, the author of this gospel, had an apocalyptic worldview. That is to say that he and his community, who lived about 50 to 60 years after the life of Jesus Christ, they believed that Jesus would be returning imminently, destroying the old world, which was ruled by Satan, destroyed or broken by sin, and that he would be replacing it with God's realm, free of sin, free of hunger, free of thirst, free of broken relationships, free of sickness, free of all those qualities that we hear in that list. I was hungry, I was thirsty, I was a stranger. Now this theology and worldview is so evident when we read this, when we hear the images of when the Son of Man comes in his glory. You can see that in your imagination. All the angels with him. He will sit on his throne of glory. What a beautiful picture he paints. 2,000 years later, history has shown that Jesus' return, or at least as Matthew and his community imagine it, was not quite as imminent as they thought. So what do we as Jesus' church, what do we do with this now? How is it that we read the parable of the goats and the sheep? What if we read this parable not as a checklist or a dividing of who gets into heaven and who is going to hell on the day of the final judgment, but rather what if we read it as a parable of transformation, a transformation that all of us can experience when we go forth and we encounter God where the world is broken, where we find God in the brokenness of the world. A friend of mine named William, he came to the church in his mid-20s. He was eager to get involved in the life of his new congregation. Although he would not have admitted it at the time, when William volunteered to work the early morning shift on Christmas Eve at the emergency winter shelter at his church, he now realizes that his intentions weren't pure. They weren't exactly for the right reasons. He was, in fact, trying to score some church brownie points, some church golden stars. He was going to show all his new Christian brothers and sisters what a good person he was, right? I think we have all been guilty of that once or twice. I know that I have. So he showed up for his 3 a.m. shift. He was tired. He was exhausted from having worked that morning, Christmas Eve, and then having celebrated Christmas Eve with his family, worship at his local congregation, and then waking up at the wee hours of the morning when Santa Claus was still out delivering the gifts and the lumps of coal, and he showed up at the church. It was all that he could do to stay awake. The lights were dim, almost all the way down. He could only see the silhouettes of the guests sleeping on the cots in the upper room of his church. He was put off by the incessant snoring. He wanted the time to go by faster so that he could go home and climb into his bed and sleep. Well, 7 a.m. finally came, and it was time to turn on the lights, wake up the guest, and close the shelter until the next morning, until the next evening. It was at that very moment, when those lights came up, that God reached out, grabbed William's heart, and transformed him. He tells me that when the lights came up, he saw the faces of these homeless guests. And they didn't look like what he thought they would look like. Some of them did. But many of them were also in their mid-20s. They looked like he did. The least of these were indeed his brothers. Some of them woke up and wished him a Merry Christmas. Here it was, Christmas morning, and he had spent the last 4 hours wanting the time to go by quicker so that he could go home and get in the same warm bed that he sleeps in every night. These people were kind and they were gentle, and William was overwhelmed by guilt and remorse. That time had come, and he was now face to face with the brokenness of the world. Closing the shelter doors behind the shelter guests who were heading back out into the cold winter Christmas day to fend for themselves until the next evening, William encountered the realm of God. Just for a moment, strangers welcomed into a warm place to spend the cold winter night, and he didn't even realize then as what he was experiencing until the very last moment. Once we are witness to the realm of God, even just a glimpse of it, we can hardly turn our backs on it. Our lives have been changed, in essence, when we stand before the least of these, those who are hungry, those who are thirsty, the stranger, the naked, the sick, the imprisoned. When we stand before these people, we stand before Christ the King, Christ on his throne of glory, which is unlike any human throne of glory. And like a good shepherd, Christ the King reaches down into our hearts, into our inner selves, to that secret place that we show to no one else. And he separates the goats from the sheep. And that part of us which is a goat is cast into the darkness, just banished. Go away from me, so that we no longer have to live in that way or repeat that behavior. And like a good shepherd, he takes the parts of us that comfort our little sister when she falls off her bike, the parts of our heart, the sheep, that selflessly serve and care for the least of these in our world. He separates them and reconciles them with God. And we no longer have to worry about which list it is that we are on. And that is the good news of Jesus Christ. May it be so. We now take a moment to invite you